I'm thrilled to welcome a true pioneer in the field of performance psychology, Denise Shull. Denise is the founder and CEO of the ReThink Group, where she applies her groundbreaking approach to risk and decision-making to help traders, athletes, and professionals perform at their peak. Many of you might recognize Denise as the real-life inspiration behind the character of Wendy Rhoades on the TV hit show Billions. Denise is also the author of Market Mind Games, a revolutionary book that challenges traditional thinking about emotions in decision-making. What makes today's conversation particularly interesting is that Denise takes a position counter to that of previous guest Adam Robinson. While Adam advocated for avoiding gut feelings in decision-making, Denise feels our intuition needs to be tapped into for optimal success. Denise will share insights from her work with elite traders and athletes that you can apply directly to your sports betting or life in general. I think you will all find benefits in this episode, so let's get started with Denise Shull. Denise Shull, how are you? And welcome to Bettor Thinking.
Thanks for having me. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's really an honor to have you here. The podcast is geared towards the sports bettors, and really a lot of it is the science behind sports betting and trading, psychology. So having someone with your expertise here on the podcast, I think is going to be greatly beneficial to all of our listeners. So it truly is an honor to have you here.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, I've got, the one question I've been thinking about since we scheduled you here is, what would you, if you had to make a trader, what would the characteristics be? If you were able to create one, a great trader, give me the characteristics that would make that great trader.
Wow. Self-awareness, like they know what they're thinking and feeling, and awareness of the other person, like in poker. Because the brain research shows that like in poker kind of thinking, you're not playing your cards, you're playing how you think the other people are playing their cards. It's called theory of mind. I have a theory of your mind. Brain research shows that's the thing of great trading. So knowing or being able to think about another person is like the flip side of the coin of self-awareness. I mean, there are traders, I admit, who are really good at predicting other people who don't know themselves all that well. But if I had to make one, I would say I want both those characteristics, which, by the way, are, human as opposed to mathematical.
We may have to get into some of the non-human, the future of trading with AI, but to touch on that point. So who is the other? So you have self-awareness, but then awareness of the other person. So I think that's easily understood in the poker world because I'm maybe playing against an opponent. Who's necessarily the opponent when we're trading? Who would you be?
Well,
is it the market?
My clients will have groups of people they think about that will move the prices. I have all kinds of clients and all kinds of hedge funds, but I sometimes even have them do exactly that exercise. Who do you think the groups are that are moving the prices in your instruments in general, and then maybe this week? Most of these guys, they probably wouldn't say retail traders, so to speak, but they'll say CTAs, commodity trading advisors, and how they're moving. Or they'll say real money, which they kind of tend to mean long only equity shops. But I actually ask them to think about that. And then they do get various indications of different kinds of groups. They'll use the word positioning, and then they kind of know how their competitors are positioned. The guys guys used to work with on a bank desk, and now they're scattered amongst hedge funds. So there's no one answer, but it pays to think about it.
Sure. Okay. So that's interesting because it does translate to the betting markets because they're markets, just like a trading market. It's a market just like any other. So so we're really trying to figure out And it's funny, there's Ed Miller, who's a professional sports bettor, was on the podcast. He actually said something very similar, where he was talking about the live betting market and knowing who exactly you're betting against. And he said you'd be surprised because typically in the market, you're betting against other bettors. In trading, you're trading against your fellow traders and investors, whoever's in that particular market. And he was talking about in live betting that you're really just you're going up against the sports book, and they are having just as hard a time as figuring out a live pricing model as you are, and understanding that and understanding how they're pricing things is going to work to your advantage. And if you could, of course, outprice them in any market, you're going to be profitable. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. So when you're looking at that from the trader's perspective, it's how are we judging if they're getting it correct? Like, if you give them this exercise, is there a way that you could judge that they're comprehending it?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. I mean, they'll usually tell me if I'm not making sense to them, for the most part. I mean, these are clients I work with one-on-one, right? And a lot of them I talk to a couple of times a week. So they'll just say it doesn't make sense. Or they'll do the exercise and they didn't actually do what I asked. To which I usually want to say, oh, you didn't do what I asked, or that's not what I meant. I do try to, build up people's confidence, if you will. But I'll say, well, what I was really thinking was, like, who is buying the Japanese yen right now? I happen to have 2 or 3 or 4 clients who pay a lot of attention to the yen. And there's the Japanese central bank,
BOJ,
there's the U.S. central bank, there's hedge funds, there's, retail traders even. And that's not so much true in Japan right now, but I'll ask that question directly. Who's going to buy it and who's going to sell it?
Are you tired of chasing losses and following touts who disappear after a cold streak? Well, we've all been there. Burning money on bets that seem like locks, following so-called Twitter experts with fake records, and wondering if anyone actually makes money betting sports. Well, that's why we built the Sharp app, a premium sports betting intelligence platform that's helping our members consistently find edges and make more informed betting decisions every single day. Our Proptimizer is trusted by thousands of verified users in our Discord community who openly share and track their success. No hiding, no deleting tweets, just real results you can verify yourself in our active community. Sharp app gives you professional grade tools designed specifically for Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, DraftKings Pick 6, No Vig, Parlay Play, Hot Streak, and Fliff. Download the Sharp app today at sharp.app and use code THINKING35 for 35% off your subscription. That's sharp.app and code THINKING35. Stop gambling, start winning with the Sharp app. My previous podcast guest, she said something similar about being self-aware. So I think that's a great lesson in life, not just in trading, is to be able to evaluate yourself and where you've gone wrong, what you've done correctly. From my vantage point, when I think of that, when I think of self-awareness, is if I'm making a trade and the trade has gone poorly or it just hasn't gone the way I thought it would, it's analyzing, did I make a mistake? Did I follow my rules here and it just didn't work out, because that's going to obviously happen? Or did I go astray from where I normally go or what I normally do and got myself in trouble? Like, you have to make yourself, I think you have to critique yourself in that way, as long as you're confident in what it is that you're doing. Am I wrong? Am I totally off base?
No, you're right. I mean, you need to be accurate about, like, what you've done, why you've done it. Did you make a mistake? Did a new factor come into play? I work on a little bit of a different level of self-awareness, though. I want someone to know, like, what they're really feeling and why, as to be able to ultimately differentiate true expert intuition from any feelings about one's own predicament or the threat of a trade to oneself. And so, like, I'll ask clients, what do you want to happen? So that they are aware, they want whatever. What do you really honestly think is going to happen? And I'm trying to get them to listen to their gut, right? I'm trying to avoid I kind of knew that was going to happen, but I didn't really listen to myself. And what are you afraid is going to happen? As a way to help them externalize like desire and fear, which some people might call greed and fear. I don't really like the concept of greed because I don't think it's all that accurate, actually. But I'm trying to get them to trade what they honestly really think, which they will experience as like a physical sensation. Like that's how expert knowledge is, it's in your body. It's not so much in your head, like the pattern recognition piece of it, which I'm sure applies to sports betting. So people have different abilities to know that kind of thing about themselves. They also actually have different willingness levels. Like I have a client who you could argue from the outside is most likely very self-aware. He and his wife are, for lack of a better way to put it, I'm just going to say very new age. So, encompass a whole lot of, they're very conscious of their diet and their sleep and how they treat their children. But they have kind of have no negative feelings. And so he's not really allowed to have his fear or frustration or disappointment. Now, he's gotten better with me in terms of, I think he will talk to me about it. I don't think he would ever talk to his wife about it. But a few weeks ago, I said, I want you to feel how badly you want your next trade to work. And he's like, I just have to have patience. Well, I know that what he perceives as impatience, the behavior, he's doing something more quickly than he should, right? That's what means to have patience. Wait, take your time. Well, I know it's driven by how much he wants a winning trade. I know if he can feel how much he wants a winning trade, the chances that he acts on that go down. Like he'll just be, oh, I really, really want this to work. Okay, but yet have my factors come together? Is it the right time? If he admits to the desire, I literally said, I want you to feel how much you want it. And he said, I don't know what you mean. That is a lack of self-awareness in a person that from the outside you might think is particularly self-aware.
Now, has he trained himself to be less emotional? Was he that way?
Here's the funny thing about it. He will tell you, when I first started working with him, he would tell you that his process is intuition. I mean, he's extraordinarily well-trained in his markets, and he understands the mechanics of his markets, backwards and forwards, and how one group of traders is going to affect the price on this day versus, like an earnings day. But he is very in his head. So like I always say, look, forget trying to control your emotions, because if you try to control your emotions, you're basically trying to cut yourself off from what you feel. And if you cut yourself off from what you feel, you really don't know what your intuition is. Because intuition is a physical phenomenon.
Yeah, you're touching on very personal topics here for me as well, right? So I was asking that question because I'm thinking of myself, and I had gone to a therapist to discuss this because my emotions would get too high and too low, obviously depending on how things were going, right? And what the therapist had told me was, you have a model and you're building your model, and you need to trust the model. So when things are going poorly, it's not you, it's the model, so that you don't take things personally. I've gotten to a point now where I've had huge wins and people are just in shock that I don't get overly, I'm not celebrating all that much. And because I've kind of trained myself to not get too excited for the wins, because I feel like the other side of that coin is getting yourself too down on the losses, and then it becomes really hard to kind of focus on what the objective is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a very common approach. It wouldn't be the one I would use.
I know. Well, that's why I want to hear yours.
I like the ultimate skill is knowing what you're feeling and why, with both sides of that question being accurate. And usually, while it's an easy question to say and basically an easy question to comprehend, it's not an easy question to answer accurately. So the what, like people will say fear of missing out. Fear of missing out is essentially never the fear of missing out. Like if you say, okay, what happens if you miss out? They say, well, I'll be mad at myself, or I'll feel stupid, or I'll look stupid. So, okay, what happens if you like feel stupid or look stupid? It's the regret. It's the potential regret, not the actual missing. It's like the implication of the missing and then what it means. And they don't realize that they're afraid of the second or third effect. So I had a young client at a big hedge fund a couple of years ago. We did this, like, okay, what happens if you miss out? And then what happens if you feel stupid? And then he basically realized he would rather lose money and his management team think his analysis was good and super smart than make money and have them be suspect of his analysis. His job is to make money. Like they're not going to, in the end, they're not going to care. Like they're going to go, well, we don't get how you saw that, but whatever, you made money, fine, like do it again. They're not going to care. But once he was able to verbalize that to me, I'd rather not look stupid and lose money than look stupid and make money. He was like, well, that's ridiculous. So like his actual feeling wasn't what he thought. Well, and his why wasn't what he thought. So like at its core, the latest neuroscience says all of us are always predicting our own future safety. Like, is this good or bad for me? What your therapist did, she was able to help you use your intellect to believe that your model will keep you safe. And that's fine. Like, that's really the simpler way, you know? But what happens is people don't necessarily believe their model or the factors change and, you know, they can't make that leap to the model will work.
Yeah, it's very it is difficult and it takes a long time. But do you notice you've dealt with so many traders, is that more common, that mindset where they want to be right or at least perceived to be right more so than the money, or is that a unique person who has that?
The more so was a little bit unusual, but I can tell you, you know, and I have clients who founded hedge funds you've heard of and founded hedge funds you haven't heard of. And I have portfolio managers who work for them and I have analysts who work for them. Almost all, not 100%, but like 95%. If you go down a road of what can go wrong, how they are perceived comes into play. Like I have one founder of a hedge fund, you know, very successful at a big, you know, typical career path for this kind of guy, at a big bank, at a big hedge fund, go to another big hedge fund. That hedge fund spins him out, gives him money to open his own hedge fund. You know, and now he's in his 50s. And when things go wrong, he's like, have I lost it? Do I not know how to do this anymore? You know, that's just like questioning one's own intelligence. Or like in his case, got 20 PMs who work for him. He doesn't want to be the worst trader in the office.
Right.
Like I keep telling him, you know, your attention is now split between trading your markets, running a fund that's got like 50 people who work for you. He's expanding, he's bringing in capital and taking on new markets. I'm like, you're not going to be able to trade as well in that environment. You just have too many things vying for your attention.
Yeah, it's very.
But he's going to say, like most clients in some way, shape, or form, was I never as smart as I thought I was? Have the markets changed such that I've lost it? Which, by the way, a few minutes ago I talked about, like the human brain always predicting, is this good or bad for me? That's a person saying, like, am I safe? Can I depend on my skills? That's the common thread.
How do we get ourselves to the point where we can be confident in our abilities? Because it seems like a lot of us have that insecurity. And you're talking about some of the best traders and hedge fund managers in the world still have that insecurity.
Well, what I know and what the research actually shows is that if you can verbalize your worries, they lose their impact. Like, it's ironic because people think, well, if I admit I'm scared, I'll be more scared, or, I'll be incapacitated. It's not true. If you get the feeling right, it just loses its intensity, and you're able to more say to yourself, well, what should I do to prevent that from happening? So, like, I don't know if you can see, that's an article about Lindsay Jacobellis, who won 2 gold medals in snowboard cross in 22. That was from 18, but she was never very good at pulling herself out of the gate. It's like when 6 snowboarders ride down the... She won more medals than any other snowboard cross athlete. But getting out of the gate wasn't her strong point. She's just really good technically on the course. I'm like, look, of course you're afraid in the gate. Like, it's a death-defying sport. Like, of course you're nervous in the gate. Just admit it. I'm nervous. What happened? She started getting out faster.
It's like you're reminding me of Rocky in the scene when Adrian breaks him down and he's like, you want me to say it? I'll say it. I'm scared.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole movie changes from that point on once he admits that he was actually scared to lose everything.
Like, there is an emotional logic to everything. Like, if fear didn't have a purpose, a lot of us would not ever graduate from college. We'd not, you do this stuff because you're afraid of what happens if you don't do it. But it gets you, you write the paper in college because if you don't, you'll fail the course. You don't want to write the paper, but you don't want to fail the course, so you write the paper. If you remember that the human brain is always saying, is this good for me or bad for me? And then what do I need to do to get more of what's good for me? And the psyche is going to give people feelings about what's good or bad. Some of them are going to be based on the person's past experience, which are generally going to be faulty. Like if you were the youngest kid in the family and your older brother beat up on you, and you feel like you have to prove yourself, or, stuff like that. And everybody's got that stuff, right? Of some way, shape, or form. So that's why I say, what we want to figure out is okay, these are all the feelings I have. These are about me and these are about the market. These are about me and these are about the bet. Yeah, your brain is going to focus on the ones about you because your brain's trying to keep you safe. But those aren't telling you anything about what the price action's doing. Okay, and so I'll tell people, okay, it's December. I don't care. We can trade on the feelings about you because you want to keep your year and get your bonus.
Right.
As long as we admit that that's what we're doing. As opposed, yeah.
So we have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to. So are you saying we have to separate our personal feeling, or at least we have to acknowledge the personal feelings that may be motivation that we didn't necessarily think it? Our motivation may be different than what we think our motivation is. That is what I'm hearing
all the darn time. But people don't know it. And then they apply this cognitive, use my intellect to control my behavior. But the feeling has some actual validity. And it's stronger than use my intellect to control my behavior. I mean, people can use their intellect to control their behavior a lot of the time. But it interjects some amount of stress. And then they're like, damn it, I did it again. Why did I do that? Well, because there's some underlying feeling. Like, I have another client who's overtrading recently. And I couldn't get anywhere with him. And I said, wait, you play tennis, don't you? I'm like, what goes on in your tennis game? And he said, oh my God, lately I've been double faulting all the time, not following through on my serve. And I don't know tennis that well, but I know he's a decent player. And I'm like, why is that? He's like, well, I'm trying to see where the ball goes. So he's too excited to get it right. So that's the case. I want you to feel how much you want that serve to work. Because if you admit how much you want the serve to work, that arm's going to come all the way down. I know, because I do this exact same thing in golf, by the way. I'm so sure I hit it well that I lift my head up, 1 second too early, and we know what happens then. But I don't know. There's a weird magic about verbalizing what one is really feeling, where the chances that you get information out of it improve, and the chances that you just act it out are reduced.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting information, and something that I need to work on too. You deal with you work with athletes then as well as not just
Don't
traders.
so much. I have worked with athletes, but I kind of decided not to really pursue it. Basically, there's a bazillion sports psychologists, and besides that, like, you can do really good work with an athlete, and inevitably their coach will step in and negate it.
Yeah.
So
I totally get that, because when you were saying that about the trader who also plays tennis, I mean, I played sports, and I'd always go back to some things that that would happen to me just mentally when you play. It's like if you're playing baseball and you're in a big at bat at the end of the game, and you're thinking about what, let's say it's the World Series, and if you get a hit here, you're going to win the World Series. If you're thinking about the parade and the money and you're not focused on that objective, which is to just get the bat on the ball and get, make good contact, whatever it is that you need to think about to get through that bat. I think when you bring the externalities into your brain, I would imagine that becomes way more difficult. So if you're trading and you're thinking about, man, if this thing plays out the way I think it's going to play out, I'm buying myself a new Mercedes, or, whatever it is, which I'm sure you spent many years on Wall Street, as did I. You've got those kind of people out there where it's all about the money and can I buy a new watch and can I get a new car, or whatever it is. I think that's a detrimental attitude to have, or mentality to have. I think the people I've seen be successful, and you've been around a lot more successful people than I have, it's not so much the financial gains, although that's a nice consequence of the work. It's the ability to kind of separate yourself from the two. So the money, it comes if you do well, but they have the ability to kind of separate themselves. I don't know if you've seen that, or if that's just something I'm seeing anecdotally.
Mean, that's where I'll go back to, like, if it's my client, what does the car symbolize? What does the watch symbolize? Like, why is that important? And I can tell you inevitably it's going to be, my dad didn't think I was very smart, or, my older sister, or whatever, like it's self-validation, right? It's like
that. So that's the trophy to prove that you are competent and successful and good.
Yeah. And when I can get people to talk about that influence of how badly they want that is dissipated. So, like with the World Series batter, if I ever got a chance to work with one, I would be like, okay, we're going to admit you're nervous. I want you to admit you're nervous as you're walking up there, and like admit you want it. And admitting those two things, as long as like the intellect is connected to the feeling in the stomach, will then allow you to focus, because those feelings are like static. They're like interfering with the process. That was why Lindsay admitting to fear, like, it literally, it's like muscular static. Like, if you just go, okay, I got it, and you go, okay, yeah, I want it. Okay, what do I have to do to get it?
So as the batter, you're going to ask me, well, what's your fear? Like, what's the worst?
Well, I would say, like, if I were in the dugout, like, this is never going to happen, but
right.
I'd be like, okay, how's it feeling? Where's your confidence? I mean, that's the angle I usually take: confidence and conviction, and what's adding to confidence or subtracting from confidence. But like, every client of mine knows they're going to talk about what's making them anxious. I'll actually have people make scales of like panicked, afraid, worried, concerned. She used trepidatious going into the 18 Olympics, like a word that captures the degree of anxiety they're feeling. And sometimes it's like, I'm a little worried. This is a big deal. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, I'm petrified. But the research, it's called emotion differentiation and granularity. The research shows the more you can be differentiated and granular. Differentiated is like, is it fear or frustration? Big categories. Granular is like panic to worry, annoyed to infuriated. The more money, by the way, traders make. But there's lots of research around this with athletes. Like if an athlete writes out everything that they feel about a failure, they get over it faster.
Well, you hear clinical psychologists will talk about that with any fear is really confronting, having the patient confront that fear is the easiest way to get over it, which is part of, we could go off on a whole tangent about what I see with kids today, which is parents who just, they constantly try to put their kids in a bubble and have them avoid anything that might potentially trouble them or bother them, which leads to very weak adults when they get out into the real world.
Yep. And if you really think about that, like the parent will claim that they just want their kid to be safe.
Safe is such it's such a bad word sometimes.
In reality, the adult can't handle the feeling. Like they can't. Yeah, you don't want your kid to be, miserable or terrified or whatever, 24/7. But you also want them to learn to like deal with life. I have a friend who is a fabulous psychoanalyst in New York City. I mean, this woman is like gifted beyond. And a long, long time ago, like 20 years, she said the key to like raising kids is to be able to teach them to tolerate frustration. Like let them struggle, let them fail, let them figure it out. Like, and they just need to know you're there, like on their side. But if they can learn to work through those feelings, I mean, that creates like resilience and perseverance and, I can fail and still succeed if I try again.
Well, there's no way to strengthen any muscle without resistance. You need some sort of resistance.
Thank you.
Yeah. It drives me crazy when I see that, and it comes from a good place, but it's the Oedipal complex, right? It's the mother who just can't let their child go out into the world and face maybe some adversity,
which is their own fear.
That's right. They're just projecting their own fears, right, on them, because look, none of us want anything bad to happen to anyone that we care about. So it is difficult to have to let, especially children, allow them to go out into the world on their own and get into their own fight. They may fight with their friends, and you see parents nowadays. I mean, when I was a kid, my mother wasn't going to get involved in, if I was fighting with one of my friends, she wasn't going to call up their mom and settle it. We settled it,
Right.
And now you see that nowadays with kids, where the other thing is school. If a kid gets in trouble in school or something happens, they get bad test score, it's not the kid's fault, it's the teacher's fault a lot of the times, where they go in and so I just think it leads to weak kids. So we're seeing that. I think we've seen that in the last maybe 20 years or so with adults who just haven't had the ability to handle adversity when they get out into the workforce. And certainly it'd be real tough to become a trader and deal with risk or anything of that sort if you don't have that ability to handle adversity.
I mean, I have some young clients. Like I have a 25-year-old that I've worked with since he was 18. His dad asked me, he was supposed to play professional soccer and he probably would have, but he kept getting hurt. And truth is, he was acting out against his parents and the pressure to play professional soccer. But, I've seen some of this there. I had a young woman who was brilliantly talented who worked for me, who I ended up had to let her go because I was like, I think you need some real world experience. Because I was so impressed with her talent, I was very generous with her. And then one day it wasn't enough. And I was like, I don't know, like, okay, I've been inadvertently contributing to that, sort of taking care of you, and go get that job at $185,000 working for somebody else and let me know how that goes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've been in that situation when managing people where, you know, how the year end comes around and now you're you're giving out the bonuses, and like the one person that you the one person that's getting the best bonus or whatever it is, and the one that you're like, all right, that's going to be my easiest conversation, winds up being the most difficult. And like they you're like, you just went through all these hard conversations with everyone else, and you're like, all right, and then they come in and they complain the most, and you're like, I love you the most, like you're you're my best employee. We gave you the most, so it's interesting. I hate managing people, so I don't envy.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very hard.
It's a different
People
skill
are
set.
hard. People are hard.
People are difficult. Yeah, and you're dealing with all these different personalities, and but to be a hedge fund, you deal with a lot of hedge fund managers, and they worked their way up typically, and now you've got to manage a group of people. You just mentioned that you had someone 50 employees. It takes away from what it is that you're good at. I think we all want. I know I'm like this, where I would love to just be able to do what it is I love doing and not have to deal with all the other, like, I don't want to have to deal with taxes and employees and the administrative and answering emails and opening up the actual snail mail, like, doing all those things. Unfortunately, we all have to do them to one degree or another.
Yeah, believe me, I know. I know. It's all that other stuff.
It's the other stuff that makes our lives difficult. But I want to ask you something else about psychological capital. I think that was something that you had talked about. What is psychological capital?
That's a darn good question. I'm sure I've defined it 100 times, but it's basically that feeling that you can do the thing. So I will talk to my clients about managing it. So I end up talking a lot about sleep and breaks, because what I'm trying to create and help them keep and leverage is the feeling I can do this in any realm. But, so the trade goes wrong, so you're wrong a lot, like this year with all of the changes going on in politics, markets have been pretty choppy, maybe until the last few days, but, and even then, not a true trend. Just what needs to happen to feel like you can find your feelings about the problem, which is the market or the sports bet. Like you have enough energy, you feel physically good enough that you can access your expertise and you can tolerate the other feelings. Like you're maybe less irritable. If you're sleep deprived, you won't perceive the risk. But in short, it's that feeling I can handle this. And I think it's a resource, it's a resource that one needs to replenish.
Are there times where you advise traders just not to trade when they're not in that right frame of mind?
Yeah. Last week, I was really trying to get a trader. He's a former Goldman Sachs, trades crazy actively, hundreds of millions of dollars. I was trying to get him to take a break. And in my mind, I meant like Friday and Monday. He's taken breaks in the past, like where he's taken a year off or a month off, not a year, but like a month or two. And he's like, I can't do that right now. But I'm like, I just literally mean like take the positions down, take the weekend with your family, like don't think about it. Then I use the example of another trader at a big fund in Connecticut that I used to work at called Grand Capital. And their head trader used to tell me when he was walking in from the parking lot, he would know what was going to happen. And he was global macro, he traded everything. And then he started reading his Bloomberg and he'd get all confused and not trade what he thought in the parking lot. I was trying to get my current client to get that, like we would get away from his market. And then how the waves are rolling, so to speak, would come to him when he wasn't trying to like torture the screen, give him the answer. But he wouldn't do it. But I've had other clients who do it. I had a client last year who did it, and I thought a particularly inopportune time. It ended up working out well. I thought he was doing a little bit of escapism because all of a sudden on Thursday he decided to go on a vacation, and I was like, "Wait, what? You're going to be gone next week?" When the central bank, I don't know if it was I do know. I just don't want to say. Like, there was a big economic announcement. Like, that was a little bit of impulsive move. It ended up working out fine. But, I mean, equilibrium, like that feeling like you basically understand what's going on and you can basically navigate. Doesn't mean you think you're going to win per se, but you're not distracted by you think you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. And like sleep, physical energy, perspective. Experts have pattern recognition that's not explicit. Like intuition is a valid form of knowledge. Like if you go research it, they'll call it somatic intelligence, visceral intelligence, they'll call it intuition. But it's something that at one point you learned, explicit, like step by step. And then the longer you work with it, and anyone in any sort of sport knows this, or playing the piano or a chef, like how the factors fit together and you don't actually have to go through step. You get this sense that something's right. Well, I try to keep my clients in a space where they can access their sense of what's right. And to me, the way that feels, the foundation for that is psychological capital.
See, I always felt in trading, it was kind of like being the quarterback where, the great quarterback, like you said, they're not really they don't have to necessarily think as the play's going on. It's sort of, it's happening subconsciously. Because they've thought it out ahead of time. They did all the thinking during practice so that when they get out on the field, they just kind of see it and react. You're going to want to do that basically in every sport. You're a golfer. I play golf. Like if you're thinking about 5 different things in your golf swing, good luck. Like it's just, this is what makes golf so difficult is the fact that the ball doesn't move. So it's so much easier to get in your own head in golf than it is maybe in baseball when there's a 100-mile-an-hour pitch coming at you. And it's what makes golfers, it's what gives it's why psychology with golfers and they get the yips. I don't even want to say it out loud and give myself the yips, but it's what makes that sport unique. But like you said, I think I do think that translates into the trading and the sports betting world where I had my previous guest, she was talking about information overload. She's a neuroscientist, and she brought up a study where they had given people in a horse race handicapping. They gave a series of people different amounts of information. So maybe 3 pieces of information to one group and 10 pieces and then 30 and so on and so forth. And the more information given to the handicapper, the higher their confidence level. But their results weren't any better or worse than those who had very little information, which was interesting. So the ones who just had information on, let's say, I don't know exactly what information they gave them, but the more, so her theory was sometimes we could just we could overdo it with the information. We can continually start looking for more and more pieces of information to validate what we already know or think we know.
I deal with that almost every day. And I will try to pull people back to what are the most important factors? Or I have one analyst at a big hedge fund, and this person is an incredible analyst, and they have a joint master's in engineering and computer science, so they can analyze what NVIDIA is doing, etc. But at the end of the day, it's sort of okay, no one else is going to know that. This is a line I end up using. If you know all this stuff, but no one else in the market does, it's not going to do that much good. They're only going to buy for those reasons once they know those reasons. If those reasons are so obscure, it's why moving averages, simple things work. What I thought you were going to say about the neuroscientists, there was a study done at Stanford where they put out, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 6 jars of jelly, and they were weird exotic flavors, lemon, lime, mint, or whatever. And then they put out 36 different flavors, and they sold way more with the lower number of flavors. The greater number of flavors, which you think your intuition would be oh, well, somebody will think, peach apricot sounds good, and somebody will think, chocolate strawberry sounds good. But no, when there were 36, people were I'm not buying anything.
It becomes information overload.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought you were going to go for.
Yeah, well, you see I love those those shows like the Gordon Ramsay shows, like the Kitchen Nightmares and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll go into a restaurant and it's got a 5-page menu with and it drives people crazy. And when you go to a lot of really nice restaurants, high-end restaurant, the menu's not very large. It's
Right.
everything's fresh. They're getting it same day, and I think, I do think at some point when we get just too much information, we don't even know what our
Yeah.
brains just can't even process it.
With my clients, I will go back though to like, what do you really honestly think? Given what you know, what do you really honestly think? And what are you afraid of? And if you're afraid of whatever, unemployment numbers are going to be X a week from Friday, like, well, what can you do? What can you know about unemployment? And like, I know last month I had conversations around unemployment that was like, okay, so-and-so says that, your hedge fund says this, whatever. What do you honestly think? Like, because at the end of the day, you can only trade on what you think, only trade successfully on what you think. So let's just figure out, given everything you've heard, what's your bet? You may be wrong. But assuming you're an expert, which got you into this role, and assuming you know how to listen to this information, each time that you can make a bet based on your own expertise, that's going to drive your statistics higher. Yeah. And it also does this amazing thing where in the middle, like, you realize the thing you don't actually know, or you do need more confidence in. Like, I had a client trading coffee in Brazil and talking about the weather and the effect of weather. And he said, well, half the experts think that the weather at the beginning of the season is what's critical for the coffee crop. And the other half think, well, it doesn't matter. Like, if it doesn't rain at the beginning of the season, but it rains later. And I'm like, well, which is it? He said, well, I don't know. Like 50% think one thing and 50% think the other. I'm like, okay, you've listened to all of them. How many of them are there? There's 5. Okay, how many of them do you really have credibility? 3. Okay, of the 3, in which ones do you think are telling the truth? Like, make up your mind. What do you really think? And if you can't answer it, and though he said, I'm going to go and talk to so-and-so again. Like, because in that he realized, wait a minute, I could clarify what I really think.
Talking to so-and-so, is it to get their opinion, or is it to clarify something that he was
in that case
thinking?
It was to get more data about their viewpoint of the coffee crop at that point.
Because I get concerned with the people who have to validate their own and that drives me crazy, especially when they're using me to validate their position and I don't agree with the position, and then they go ahead and do what they were doing anyway, which is fine by me. But when you ask my opinion and then you do the opposite, then you really didn't want my opinion. What you wanted me to do was validate yours.
Yeah. I mean, I've had clients who ask too many opinions. But my point was, when you do that, what do you really think? Honestly, what do you really think, and what are you afraid of? What people find out is maybe the thing that they don't know enough about that they could, or they're willing to risk. I don't know this, and neither does anyone else, so I'm just going to go with it. But again, this is like an advanced form of self-awareness. You go down this rabbit hole of what you really think and what you're actually afraid of. Like, your fears, for the most part, are going to be giving you information. They're going to be exaggerated based on everybody, your brain's trying to keep you safe. But the more you do this, the more you can get used to like your own exaggerations, and you can discount them effectively and find if your psyche's telling you there's something you need to go find out.
So is there something we can do to get ourselves better at, are there any sort of techniques, anything that we can do to get ourselves better at this, at trusting our intuition, or at least even listening to it when we're betting, when we're making these trades or any sort of risk that we're taking in high pressure situations?
I would say the first is be willing to know what you're feeling. The second is to practice. So I always tell people, like, to practice on the weekends in their sports, or, on on their way to Home Depot to buy the thing that someone sent them to buy. Like, like, so we're going to track yourself. Track how often that little feeling is right.
Paper trade your emotions.
Kind of. Yeah. Like, honestly, probably the sentence that upsets me more than anything when a client says to me is, I knew it. Because I don't want any of my clients ever in the I knew it. Because that means they didn't really listen to themselves last week or the month before or whenever it was. And I perceive my job as to help people recognize their true intuition and listen to themselves, to find that expert pattern recognition that's delivered as a sentence. But it's hard. The average person out there, first of all, is told not really to believe it, right? Like it's suspect. Your emotions will lead you astray. You have to go with the probabilities. Like all these things that are not, know what you feel and why. So I'm like, practice what you feel and why outside of the trade or the sports bet. So I had a client, actually, I just talked to him from New Zealand. He's playing in the New Zealand Pro-Am. He's obviously a good golfer. Last year, he was in another country, not planning on playing golf. He grew up extraordinarily quantitative. When I told him, what are you feeling and why, he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. But he said, well, Denise, my friends, convinced me to play. I don't remember what country they were in. He goes, I didn't have any clubs, so I rented clubs. He goes, so I have crappy clubs. And I decided, well, gee. He goes, I am literally just going to do what Denise says and go with the very first club that comes into my mind. I've never played this course before. I've never played these clubs before. The best score of his life. He's like, okay, there's got to be something to this because that's like statistically not possible. Except he's like, I had nothing to lose. And I figured, you know what? I think I'll pull a 6-iron. Okay, pulled a 6-iron. Because I didn't think about it. I didn't try to say, we have to hit it 142 yards. I just, what club do I think I should use? Whatever came to mind, I used to. Unconscious pattern recognition is a real thing. Human beings have it in areas they are experienced. The question
is, we need the experience.
Yes.
In order to have it. So we need that experience first.
Yeah. I mean, there is some evidence that inexperienced traders can read a chart and predict where the price is going, but that's because the chart is showing you human behavior, right? And so they have a natural theory of mind. We all have theory of mind. We couldn't drive down the highway. That guy's about to pull out in front of me. But to be successful over time, you need to have learned the craft. But once you do, the things you learn become subconscious. And when they're subconscious, you sense them. You don't think them. Your body tells you.
So I'm about to make this trade, and I'm feeling anxiety. What's the first thing I ask myself? Why are you feeling the anxiety?
What's it about? You're going to say, I'm going to lose money.
Right.
But what happens
I don't want to lose. Let's say that, all right, let's say it's, I've got a divorce going on. I've got some financial issue, and I really can't afford to lose. I've lost 3 big trades in a row. I can't afford to make another. I've got all these, everything is kind of spiraling out of control here against me. Not a particularly good time to be trading, most likely. But I'm about to make this trade. Everything kind of lines up for me. I like the trade, but I'm feeling anxious. Now, am I writing this all out?
Losing money? Well, I will have people write it out if they need to and if they have the time. And writing it out when you're first doing it is better because, I can just do it in my head and I can help someone to do it in their head, but it's kind of torturous and tedious. And so if you have the time and you're practicing doing it, writing out is good. But okay, what happens if you lose money on this trade? Literally what happens? So then usually they'll say, well, I will have lost 4 in a row and I will be embarrassed and I'll be mad at myself. But actually, it won't be materially any difference. Okay. You're embarrassed and you're mad at yourself. Then what? Well, then I won't trust myself to trade. Okay. Well, if you won't trust yourself to trade, then what? Well, then I won't be able to trade at all. then I won't be able to make the money that I've already committed to in the divorce. Like there'll always be something down the road that's catastrophic-ish. And that's what's really causing the anxiety. And when you get that thing down the road and you basically shine the sunlight on it, make it conscious, make it explicit, get it out on the table, it usually loses its power.
Yeah, so that one trade is not necessarily going to get you to that fear, to the utmost worst thing that could happen to you, but it's moving you along that path. But that one trade is not going to change your life. I mean, it's going to take a series of events. You've got to basically tell yourself, this is the future of whatever it is I'm afraid of in the future is what's driving this fear, and it has nothing to do with this particular trade. I need to go ahead and make I've got to trade it. I've got to put the trade on, put the position on, whatever it is.
Well, I often am going for what's the very worst that can happen, and I will ask people. Like I recently, this is in the last year or so, I had a client, had a small hedge fund of his own, had a killer trade, and I mean killer, like $5 million into $500 million. Like, and in any event, it was like, why am I nervous about trading? I don't even care anymore. And we went down this sort of trading in the morning. He's got kids. This worst that can happen. And basically the worst that could happen is he would be trading, not take his kids to school on time. His wife would be mad at him. Like she would divorce him. Like this was all like, am I going to look at my phone in the morning before I take my kids to school? And the level of anxiety he was experiencing, well, it was this, way down the road. Like looking at his phone equated his wife divorcing him because he got his one kid to school late. Well, he burst out laughing. People don't realize they have these catastrophic predictions, and that's what's causing the anxiety.
Right.
It's not the losing money on this trade. People even say, I know if I lose money on this trade. I had a young client who trades a small book at a hedge fund the other day going, well, I'm down $8 million in the year. It won't really matter if I'm down 10, but he was paralyzed. This happens all the time. People have the intellectual knowledge that the thing they think they're afraid of isn't worthy of being afraid of. But they can't use their intellect to talk themselves out of it. They can't because they're subconsciously predicting catastrophe. And when they make that catastrophic prediction conscious, they do often laugh. Or they do often say, okay, the hell with that, I can take this trade. And tolerate. The anxiety dissipates and becomes like manageable or funny or irrelevant or...
You deal with a lot of really, intelligent people. Do you think this is a problem necessarily? Because I've heard this from fairly high IQ people where they're like, sometimes I wish I wasn't as smart as I was because I wish I didn't know as much as I know because I'm constantly in my own head and I'm constantly thinking. I just wish I could go through life and just be a person who didn't overanalyze and overthink all the time.
Well, usually someone like that also was greatly rewarded for their analysis and or they really did grow up in a situation that felt unsafe to the child and they had to constantly analyze like, mom and dad are fighting, mom's an alcoholic, but, I'm just telling you, obviously, and they're like, so they learn to be in their head. We have patterns of how we are likely to feel based on our self-image and our early experiences. And so, like if you read my book, Market Mind Games, it's about helping people figure out what's that pattern of what they learned to expect, in third grade that's now coming into play. And it's just the way the human being develops. Like, a little kid is figuring out who they are, where they fit in the world, how they get what they want, how they stay safe. And now we know we predict based on past experience. And so the past experience, it's about who we are in a risk environment, where we are going to make or lose money. And losing money isn't good. Like nobody wants to lose money. Those expectations of ourselves come into play and they will, like when we say control the emotions, they really mean control those irrelevant emotions that are just about you. But you can't control those without losing access to the ones that are giving you information.
So it's okay to have the fear to lose, as long as we understand what it is that's. I mean, we're human beings. We're all going to have some emotion whenever we're taking on any sort of risk, to varying degrees. But it's okay. I mean, everyone who's made a trade has had some degree of, this might not work. So I think what I'm getting here is basically you have to just be honest with yourself as to what it is. Are you afraid of something in particular with that trade or that bet that you're making? And can you go out and maybe get the information that you need to make that fear subside a bit? And if not, do you have the confidence in your ability to just go ahead and make that trade anyway? I'm just thinking of the coffee bean trader. So I think it kind of comes full circle here to where we started, where you said the best trader, self-awareness, and then awareness maybe of your opponent or the market in general. And so I think that's kind of it's a good place to kind of wrap it up. And I mean, the information was phenomenal. It's interesting because you've taken some. I like the fact that you bring emotion. You're basically saying, hey, bring the emotions out so that we can figure out exactly where they're coming from and why they may not be as detrimental or as I don't even know what the word is, as catastrophic, I guess.
Destructive.
Yeah. They're really not when you say it out loud. It may start to sound silly as to why you're getting yourself so anxious and worked up about some crazy off in the future event.
An emotion alone never made or lost a dime. There's just been this grand misperception that, emotions make or lose the money. No, it's the choices you make. Choices make or lose the money. The trick is to not have the choice be an acting out of the emotion. So when you change your opinion that the emotions are information, maybe they're information about your childhood, and maybe they're information about the trade, but they are information and they are meant to help you in their pure form. You right away reduce the chances you're just going to act on them. Like, be disciplined has been about not acting on your emotions, right? But the intellect's ability to force discipline is not as great as really anyone would want it to be. When we use what we want and we understand what we're afraid of, we can separate those things and they become assets to us.
I think
I will get off my soapbox.
No. I appreciate. Actually, can I ask you one more thing? I'm sorry if I'm keeping you a little bit, but overtrading. Do you find that when people are having, I guess there's two ways to go. Some people may just freeze up and not want to trade at all. But I think when some people getting into a losing streak, they wind up overtrading. And we do that I see it in sports betting all the time. You go on a losing streak and then you want to bet everything under the sun. And I've done this on online poker, more online than in person. So I've acknowledged the fact that I have a propensity to do it, where if you get tilted by something that someone catches a card they shouldn't have caught, or you even if you make a mistake, you're mad at yourself. You can play for hours and hours and hours playing pretty solid, and then all of a sudden tilt it all off in a blink because your emotions go crazy. And it's so much easier to do online, which traders have to deal with as well, because you're really just looking at a screen or multiple screens and clicking buttons. And sometimes if you don't have you don't have your if you're doing it by yourself, I think it becomes the likelihood of that happening is greater. And with traders and poker players, we're there by ourselves a lot of the times, where if we had to go ahead and pitch this idea to a group of people, it wouldn't happen. So do you see that, where the overtrading happens?
I mean, it's frustration.
Mm-hmm.
It's wanting it really badly. Like frustration, you gave some money back. You were having a killer night at poker. You were having a great week of trading. You just didn't want to give any back, and then you just went back to that high water mark, right? Like, online poker is actually a perfect place where you could say, okay, what am I really feeling? And like, why am I really feeling it? And do I really want to play another hand? Do I really want to, like, what's it going to get me? And if you're honest with yourself, it's going to be some sort of bigger thing of proving you're a good poker player. It's not going to be that next hand, winning that next hand. It's not.
It's the fact that you want to win. And here it is. I put all this effort in. I was winning, and now I'm losing. Well, if I lose $5 or $5,000, I'm just letting it all go at this point.
I once had a client who hired me to help him not go on tilt when he played Kevin Hart. Like, there were these underground poker games in, who knows what city. And he was like, Kevin Hart doesn't really know how to play poker. Like, and when he wins against me, he literally hired me to help him not lose it when he played Kevin Hart. This was 15 years ago. And he didn't stick with it. Like, I couldn't get him to do this. But every time I see Kevin Hart on TV, I think, I should poker game.
That is it. Well, yeah. No, that's interesting. I've been on both sides of that coin in poker, because usually if you're playing with buddies or maybe even acquaintances, maybe hopefully not your buddies, but you get some guys that you maybe don't necessarily like, or you don't respect their game, and it takes you back to sports. That'll take you off your game. You got a pitcher that you have animosity towards that pitcher for some reason. Depending on how you focus that energy, it could be detrimental. It could be a good thing. It depends on the person. But I think for me, more often than not, it puts me in a bad place, and I'm not getting in that moment, in that mindset, like you said, where we're just letting it happen. We're trusting our instincts and our intuitions at that point and just letting it happen.
I mean, in that client's case, he perceived himself he was a professional poker player. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had a family business, but like, he spent his time playing poker and traveling around the world playing poker. And so the idea that this actor comedian could beat him at poker was just intolerable.
I get it. No, I get it. It would drive me nuts too.
And not just once, like a bunch of times.
Right. And then you start thinking, what is he doing? I assume he didn't think he was cheating, but like he
didn't think he was cheating. It was
right.
Just like,
you just get like, how could this guy be so lucky all the time against me? I've had that mentality. Like, I mean, this guy just every time I'm in a hand against this guy, he sucks out. Like, you just get that, mentality. Yeah, it's funny. But again, Denise, I've kept you longer than I asked you for, so I truly appreciate it. The knowledge and information was really outstanding. I think it's going to help a lot of our listeners, and I look forward to maybe we could talk again in the future.
Fair enough. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you, John. Bye.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content.